This video may contain offensive language or be frightening to some viewers. Viewer discretion is recommended. Why I will never play the Ouija board again. This is why I will never play the Ouija board again. It was 1964, and my sister and I were 13-year-old identical twins. We were living with our mother in rural Scotland. Parties were all the rage in the 60s, and this night was one of those nights. The house we lived in was a 3-story building, with the living quarters planned out on the top 2 floors. The ground floor of the residence was a gathering area for the village's communal meetings or various parties my mother occasionally hosted. My sister and I were left upstairs for the night while our mother hosted her party. We would hear all the murmuring voices, passing compliments to one another, muffled by the floorboards between us. It wasn't long before the voices became loud music and thuds, caused by what we considered to be dancing. My sister and I were bored, to say the least. Our mother firmly told us to be quiet and behave for the duration of the night. My mother was strict, but loving, so making her angry was the last thing we wanted to do. When we were well behaved, she made it a thing to make us aware of it by buying us gifts. We had just celebrated our birthday a few weeks before, and she had bought us a life-size doll. The thing was huge. It towered over my sister and I, but we both loved it. It was around 6 feet tall, with long black string-like hair. It had a stitched mouth and 2 round buttons for eyes. We kept the doll in the wardrobe, with it being too huge for our bed. My sister suggested that we play with the doll, and as much as I wanted to, I suggested we play with something else. At school, all the girls were talking about playing with a Ouija board, how amazing they are and what they can do. Once I heard about these boards, I was hooked. I saved up my allowance over the weeks and bought one secretly to surprise my sister. This was the perfect time to reveal my surprise to my sister. So when my sister replied to my suggestion, "What shall we play?" I ran upstairs and pulled the board out from under my bed and ran back down. I presented the board as they do for the prizes of the TV game shows we watched with our mother on Thursday nights. At first my sister was dead against playing it, worried our mother would find out and be angry. It didn't take very long to persuade her to play, and we soon cleared the table and set up the Ouija board. My sister and I placed our hands on the planchette and began asking various questions, inciting spirits to come forward. The planchette moved. We looked at one another, both of our faces straight, and then we both giggled out loud. We knew we had moved it ourselves in an attempt to frighten the other. My sister suggested we turn out the lights, so we both jumped up and began to turn out all the lights in the house. "I'll grab some candles," I shouted to my sister. "And I'll grab some of Mum's jewellery," my sister replied. A few minutes later, all the lights in the house were out, and the candles we placed around the table were lit up. They cast off an orange glow around the Ouija board, complementing the mood. My sister and I were now confident. We sat face to face at the table and placed our fingers on the planchette. The house was quiet, and any sound that could be heard was that of muffled voices and music playing from downstairs. With our hands on the planchette, my sister and I began to ask the same set of questions we asked before and prepared for some sort of experience. We looked at one another and paused for a moment. Nothing happened. I felt so annoyed. My sister was visibly shook up and expressed her anxiety. I just want to stop. This doesn't feel right. We both took our hands off the planchette without ending the session correctly. I remembered the girls at school stating you should always end the session with a Ouija board. I expressed my concerns and told her we need to finish the session correctly, but it was too late. Mother came rushing up the stairs and saw us both by the table with a Ouija board out. She wasn't happy from the moment she walked in. I didn't know what had happened. We were quiet, and she hadn't seen her jewellery on the table at this point. I can't remember what she was going on about, but I noticed her white dress had been painted red. I remember asking if I could come down and paint with everyone. But once she had seen the Ouija board set out on the table, she broke down crying. She was so upset when she locked the door, she slammed the deadbolt shut. She turned to us, with a finger pointed out sharply. She sent us both to bed. My sister and I went to bed with our heads hung low. As we took ourselves to bed, we discussed why our mother was so upset. It wasn't long before she came to our room and turned out the lights. She shouted at both of us, "Get to sleep, the both of you, and don't leave your rooms or this house before I say so, okay?" My sister and I didn't say a word, and slammed our heads on our pillows and closed our eyes. I felt awful for upsetting my mother, but I couldn't get this sound out of my head. I could hear scratching. I whispered over to my sister, "Can you hear that?" She whispered back to me, "Yes, I thought it was you." Instantly, my stomach felt tight and knotted. That wasn't me. My sister jumped out of bed and ran to the bedroom light, flicking it on. The moment the lights went on, the scratching stopped. My sister and I went through the process of turning the lights on and off for a while. Every time the light was turned off, the scratching persisted. Eventually, I thought enough was enough. We were both too frightened to sleep with the lights off, so I went downstairs to get my mum to help us. I ran downstairs hectically looking for my mother, and I couldn't find her anywhere. I searched the middle floor, going from room to room. Eventually, I made my way back to the bottom of the stairs and noticed the door leading downstairs was unlocked and open. I slowly approached the door when I heard my sister come running downstairs to me. She was screaming, "It's gone!" She ran into my arms and I embraced her. "What's gone?" I asked her. She jumped out of my arms and began to explain theatrically that the doll had disappeared. She said it had opened the wardrobe door and had ran so quickly by her she couldn't see it move. She had tears rolling down her face. Suddenly, my mother came stomping down the stairs. "Why are you out of bed?" she was shouting at us both. "Why is the door wide open?" She was asking question after question. We didn't know how to answer, and we denied the accusations. We tried to explain the door was already open, and that we thought she had opened it. We also explained the doll had gone missing. My mother was visibly shaken, and ran down to the ground floor. My sister was sat on the floor with her arms wrapped around her knees. I told her to stay put, and I followed my mother. I ran down the stairs to the ground floor and saw my mother and the doll. She was crying and pulling a knife out of the doll's hand. There were bodies all over the room, and what I thought was red paint all over the place. In hindsight, it was the same as what was on her white dress. She looked up and noticed me watching her. "Bed! Go now!" my mother screamed at me, with her finger pointed at the stairs behind me. I knew I was in the wrong, and felt I had to do as I was told, or I'd be in trouble. I made my way back up to my sister. She was still sat by the door, with her head in her knees. "Come on, sis, we've got to go to bed." I held my sister by the hand, and we went to bed. We left the light on and wardrobe door open. My sister and I were discussing what had happened when we heard the door downstairs being slammed shut and bolted. Our mother came into our bedroom and the lights turned out involuntarily. My mother let out an audible gasp. My sister and I picked up on my mother's distress and instantly screamed. A gust of wind filled the room, sending shivers down my spine. With the room being pitch black, we were left with no visuals to accompany the breeze flowing around the room. The swooshing sound came to an abrupt end, with the wardrobe door being slammed shut. Again, my family and I gasped. We were too frightened to move. A silent pause filled the room for a moment, when it was interrupted with the light suddenly flickering back on. Nothing else occurred that night for us. My sister and I soon fell asleep with the lights on, despite the weeping coming from our mother's bedroom. The next morning was quiet for a school day. Too quiet. I climbed out of bed and looked out the window. The streets were empty. All the cars that were parked there from the night before were still all parked in their places. My mother came into our room and marched to the wardrobe. She opened it wide, and I ran around behind her to see what was inside. The doll stood there, towering over me. It had red stains all over it. Its once button eyes looked now somewhat real, bulging from its head. Its previously stitched smile had now stretched wide into a gaping grin, reaching from ear to ear. My mother didn't hesitate to grab the doll and drag it outside to the back of the house. I ran to the window and witnessed my mother burn the doll. I still swear to this day that I heard it cry out in pain, with its arms writhing frantically. I walked back over to the wardrobe door my mum had left open. I saw deep scratches etched into the inside of the door. I ran my fingers down the scratch and pulled out a fingernail. There was a fingernail stuck into the wood. I didn't know what to make of it. My mother came back up the stairs and began to pack our suitcases. "We're leaving today." That was all my mother would say. Shortly after, she pulled us both out of the house and into the car. I saw all the bodies laying around the ground floor, and I knew they were dead. I wrapped my hands around my sister's eyes as we made our way to the car. We left that village behind and moved 100 miles south, where my mother brought us up in a small council house. This was 40 years ago, and that's why I will never play the Ouija board again. I have since been online and checked out the village I grew up in. The village took me weeks to find. It was buried well, but what I found horrified me to the bones. I found out everyone in that village was murdered with a kitchen knife during a party one night in 1964. They recently took DNA analysis of the murder weapon and couldn't find any fingerprints. The murders still remain a mystery today. However, what was weird about the murders was that everyone who had been killed had their fingernails ripped out. Momo haunts the Ouija board. Back in our college Ouija board playing days, one of the most common spirits we encountered called itself Momo. When we first encountered it, it would answer a few of the basic questions, but would soon move the planchette repeatedly back and forth between M and O. This spirit began interrupting other spirits, and we soon began to notice that it always turned up when one friend in particular, let's call her Nicole, was present. This became more and more common, and got to the point where anytime Nicole joined in, as soon as she touched the planchette, it would immediately go to MO, 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 over and over again, until she let go. Then nothing else would come to the board, and we would have to quit. So the obvious conclusion is that Nicole was manipulating the board, correct? Maybe we all kind of suspected that, but she knew that it was ruining the fun, so she started sitting out and just observing. But it would continue, whether she was on the board or not. We stopped playing with the Ouija board when Nicole was around. Then one night, at a mutual friend's apartment, a group of us broke out the board for old time's sake. Nicole was not present, and it was not her home. We played for a while, when all of a sudden, Nicole walked in, and before she even finished saying, "Hey, what's up?" the board started the MO, 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 MO. She was not even all the way in the door, and was more than 6 feet away from the coffee table where we were sitting. Fast forward 20 years. We're all big kids now. A lot of us have stayed good friends over the years. We talk regularly. We've gotten married, have obtained careers, families, mortgages, car payments, been through good times and bad times with one another. Nicole is our token single friend. I've been best friends with her since high school, and trust me when I say there is no reason this girl should be single. She's very fit, not an ounce of fat. She's strikingly beautiful, has a China doll face, a gorgeous smile, a great sense of humour. She loves sports, especially football and college basketball. She doesn't play head games, doesn't jerk guys around. She's smart, confident, stylish, open-minded, loyal, honest, and sexy. It amazes me that she's still single. Yet she is, and basically always has been. She's never been in a very serious relationship. She's had an on and off again relationships, friends with benefits relationships. She's fallen in love many times, and has been hurt many times, and yet still is not afraid to keep trying. This summer, we had an amazing time when I saw her again on vacation, and the subject of Momo came up in our late night talk. Ironic, since I had recently remembered Momo myself, and out of curiosity, searched Momo and Ouija to see if anyone else had encountered it. Nicole confessed that she wondered at times if Momo was a spirit that was following her, and possibly driving away potential relationships. She said that she had an appointment with a reputable psychic in her area and was going to find out more. Our monthly phone chat is slated for tomorrow, and I recently received an enigmatic voicemail from her earlier this week. She said that she had the meeting with the psychic, and it was incredible. She could hardly wait to tell me about it, and I'm very curious what the psychic thought about Momo. So people of YouTube, has anyone else encountered a Momo? Does it sound reasonable that a spirit would follow someone through their life and would ruin someone's chances of any semblance of a lasting romantic relationship? Let me know if you've heard of any similar experiences. I'd love to get to the bottom of this. Thanks for listening.